Okay. Okay, welcome everyone. I'm doing a presentation called Theming with Twig and Drupal 8. I was going to do a CSS talk about, how I can make it red in Comic Sans and, really give it some nice styling, but I didn't quite do that. So it's Twig today. My name is Jennings. I'm a Drupal developer at Johnson & Johnson. I've been there for about a year. We're doing Drupal 8 work in Tampa, and so we use Twig in our projects. I wanted to give a presentation about it. If you guys have any questions while I'm going, feel free to ask. You don't have to wait till the end. Just feels relieved I'm not teaching math now. I'm teaching something I'm actually doing. So with that, let me get started. Okay, who's would be considered like a front-end, a themer, front-end developer in the Drupal sphere? Okay, have you guys used Twig?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, some of this might be a bit redundant. I'm not sure. As I'm kind of starting this from like the super beginning, like how to use Twig in it, how do you do file naming conventions, that kind of thing, and on up to what is Twig and how do we use Twig in the site. What is Twig? From the developers, it's a templating engine requiring a certain version of PHP as a particular. In the background, when your site's being built and you have Twig template files in there, they are being compiled to normal PHP and they are being cached, and we'll talk about how caching works for this. It has a syntax that's very different than PHP, what you're used to maybe from Drupal 7 theming, where you can use raw PHP. You can really do whatever you want in a PHP template in Drupal 7. You can't really do that in Drupal 8. It has syntax that's similar to other templating engines. I don't know, perhaps you guys have used Smarty or some of the others. I first encountered it when I was working on a Symphony 2 project, and I was at work, not my previous company, but a company before that, and we were starting a Symphony project, and they said, "Hey, John, we're doing a new project in Symphony, and you're going to love Twig." I said, "How do you know that I'm going to love Twig?" And that was kind of a weird conversation, but it was fine. It was good. It was different than the Drupal 7 I had been doing. Symphony, itself is different, and then it kind of feels like, probably not technically true, but Drupal 8 has some Symphony in it, has some Drupal in it, so I kind of got it from both worlds. It's intended, and this is pretty important about it, it's not really a programming logic. It's intended mainly to present. If we think, in an MVC, the view layer, it's intended really for presentation, not logic. So if you find yourself wanting to do a database call, something you would normally handle in PHP, you should really do it in a controller and not in your Twig template. Twig in Drupal 8. If you're searching online, if you're trying to find out something about Twig, you get to the Twig website, probably it's going to default you to the latest version of Twig 2. Drupal, at least in 8.4, is using version 1 of it. So just, if you're searching, if you're on their website, you see something that'd be super cool, just double check that you can use it, because Drupal 8.4 is using Twig version 1.x. And it's used in the view rendering through template files, which have a different extension than you might have been used to in Drupal 7. So we have the extension .html.twig. I still find myself a year into this writing the Drupal 7 way and wondering why isn't it working. Well, I got the naming convention wrong, and I do it repeatedly. It's like the start of a year and you write the old year, except I've been doing it for over a year now, and it's getting pretty bad. Yes, my boss is here. It's fine. She doesn't do code reviews for me, so it's fine. Fine. She doesn't catch that thing. And I don't have to worry about missing a semicolon in here. It's great. Twig is, like I said, Twig's replacing PHP template as the default templating system. A lot of equivalents here. There are some things you can do in Twig that were much more difficult to do in PHP, and of course some things in PHP that you can do that you certainly won't be able to do in Twig. But there's a lot of equivalents. There's a lot of overlap, a lot of common things that we were used to doing, like translate, something we were used to doing in Drupal 7 that we can do easily in Drupal 8. Okay, common uses for these I kind of got on the side. This is a directory in core. It's core, going to be core modules system templates. And it's just a whole bunch of them. I copy-pasted out of Atom, the text editor I use. It's free. It's made by the people at GitHub. And there's a whole bunch of them in this directory. I didn't list them all. They would go at similar screen size, would go from the ceiling to the floor. There's a lot of template files in there. And that's to say that a lot of them deal with system things. In fact, the aptly named html.twig.html file, pretty common one for use. The page or node rendering, views, blocks, menus, fields, and there's a lot. So I've just given kind of a representation of them. Some of them are admin things. Some of them are things in front end. Typically when I'm doing theming, it's typically, just for the front end user. So I'm not super concerned about the Twig template files that the administration theme is using. Again, more concentrating on the front end. And these are just their base names. There's nothing extra, and we'll talk about naming conventions, but there's nothing extra in these default names. But you would see things at the side like block, dash, just dash, or dash framing block, something a little more specialized. And we'll talk about how they get those naming conventions and what we can do about them. Okay. Template files are used in themes and modules. We don't at Johnson & Johnson write a lot of custom modules, and that's kind of by design. We want to use contrib modules. We want to use things off the shelf. We want to use configuration. We want to make deployments easier on ourselves. So if we see a user story and the user story is specifying requirements for a particular content type, menu, something a business user would write to say that the website needs, we're going to look first for contrib modules. So as a result, typically when we're using Twigs, we're only using the theme, and I've kind of geared this chat about just the theme itself. Twig is used in core. The previous slide was a screenshot out of core in that particular directory, and in contributed, or depending on how you set up your files, you can put them in, say, a theme, custom, and then your own theme. Or if you downloaded it, a theme, you could put it in, or use Composer to download it, you could put it in perhaps a contributed directory, a contrib directory. Hope I timed that right. They're inside a template directory, so I've kind of highlighted the Bootstrap theme here. So this is in your web directory, themes, contrib, Bootstrap. It was for me when I took the screenshot. And you can see it's got a bunch of things at the top, and we're interested in the templates directory. Inside the directory module theme. So you might have, again, from the web directory themes, you don't have to use contrib. We like using contrib and custom. It's not a requirement. Bootstrap templates, which is the screenshot here. Module contrib Brightcove, one of our modules we have to use for video rendering. As per the business, it has a template directory. Core themes Classy, one of the core themes that ships with Drupal 8. It has 8 or 10 templates. They're in a template directory, and the one from the last web core modules views templates. Again, each of these kind of core modules has their own set of templates. It's not a comprehensive list like I saw on the previous screen. It's only kind of necessary to do what it needs to do. And again, going back to Brightcove, template could also display something more custom, so something outside of a view or a block or a menu, something core like a paragraph. Anyone familiar with the paragraphs module in Drupal 8? So it's going to have its own paragraph template files, and you can override those in your theme. Here I'm showing a screenshot of Brightcove, and it has a couple of template files that are kind of unique to it. Not something that would be necessary in core, but something through its modules directory to specify an extension that of a particular kind of Twig template that it would need to do its front-end rendering. Okay. We had a bit of an argument about this when we started Drupal 8 sites last year. It's do we want to mimic some kind of a directory structure within our theme template directory, or do we just want to stick just all of the templates in the template directory and let it go? Because there could be a situation where I got templates, and then I say I want all the block templates to go in a certain directory. I want all the field templates to go in a certain directory. Node, partial, system. Do we want to do that, or do we want to behave like animals and just throw everything in the main directory? And we decided against that, although I've kind of shown, here we have a templates block, and we have all of the block templates that we want to override in our theme. Or perhaps we just have the page, And we could make a page directory, we could make a node directory, we could put it in system, but if it's the only thing maybe relating to a page, maybe it doesn't need to go in an extra directory. Maybe it can just stay in the templates directory. We tend to go with the option on the left, no matter what, no matter if you just have one template file in your theme. Put it in its own directory. You never know, you might have a second one. And then you've saved yourself those few precious seconds of needing to make the directory. You've already made it. Okay. Drupal core, which I had a screenshot of, the web core module system templates. So that has essentially, as long as you're using core, you could activate some core modules as well, additional modules. Everything, you should be covered. You shouldn't really have a situation where you need to override something. It's already in there. So it could be in core module system templates. It could also be in web core modules, some other kind of module like views, which is now in core, not a contrib module. So you're set from that standpoint. You don't have to override something. And that, I think, is one of the great things about these templates is if you're in a theme, you don't really have to do any of the twig if you don't really want to. And at the very end, I'll show you kind of other methods of doing it. You don't have to override anything. It's there for you. If you like how it presents in your theme, just throw some CSS to it. Maybe do something with grid or flexbox. Arrange it how you want. If it matches your design, great. You don't necessarily have to do a template override. But if you do, you can take, you can look into things that are about how the core templates are built. You can see how templates are built from contrib modules, and you can use that as a starting point in saying, what do I really need to do to my template? I've got a screenshot here on the bottom, and this is from just a looking at the code generated locally. And so it says in theme debug, theme hook page, file name suggestions, and then it begins the output from the particular template that it selected. So I want to talk about that next. Template file names. Each kind of the type of template has its own unique way of generating a name for the file. So if you're on a page, and this could be a page perhaps generated from a node, you've saved you've had maybe a page content type, you've written a title for it, you've put something in the body, you've saved it. Your front end is going to render using the page.html.twig template. But say you've created a view, and instead of outputting that view as a block or as an attachment, you wanted to output that view as a page. You're also going to get rendered page.html.twig. It made a page. It's going to use that. It's going to use that from core. If you have it in say a Bootstrap theme, it's going to look for that page.html.twig template in Bootstrap. If you have it in your custom theme, it's going to look for it there. Now let's say, take that same example. We have just a node-generated page. We have a view-generated page. If you have something, again, in Bootstrap, in your theme, just the one created from the node itself, that's going to look for an additional template, page-node.html.twig, because it was generated from a node, a content type. Say, we have a lot of custom content types in our sites. So a company, for instance, a company with specific fields, it's saved, it's a node, it has a node ID, it's saved in the database that way. It's going to load page-node.html.twig if we have a template for it. The view, which is not a node, is not going to look for that particular template file. It's just not there. It's not a node. It's not looking for it. Now let's say further, page-node-1.html.twig. If I had a particular node and I knew its ID, I could further enhance that twig that it's looking for if I knew the ID. Now that doesn't really work for us when we deploy code. We're not really deploying content, so we don't really have any idea what the node ID is going to be, so we don't really go at it with this method. However, something we could do is if we had a view and we wanted to create that view page and we wanted to export it as the home page. And in the back end, we associate, okay, if we have this path in the view and we have this path that we're setting as the home page, we could, in theory, make a template page-front.html.twig, and we can use it as the front page. This is just for pages. Each block has its own nomenclature. Views have their own nomenclature. I'm sorry?
Content types also? Content types.
Sure, they could have their own, yeah, absolutely. They could have their own nomenclature. Well, this is just one example. And we could have a slide for each of these examples, or I thought, let's go to the source. You go to this website, you can see the Twig template naming conventions. You can see all the naming conventions that say fields use, views use. Paragraphs is not going to be in there, but the page uses, HTML itself uses. It's a very comprehensive list, and it shows all of the different scenarios of what your theme could be looking for if it's going to render it. Okay, back to the kind of that same screenshot. We don't get this necessarily out of the box. If you're inspecting your code, you don't necessarily see these theme suggestions. So it's a good idea to turn on theme debugging when you're working locally. So you see this in the backend. And it's going to give you your theme hook information. Most importantly, like we can conceptualize and say, I think when I render this page, it's going to load this particular template. And you load it and you get it wrong. That's okay. If you turn on theme debugging, it's going to tell you exactly which Twig file was loaded. In this case, it's my profiles, themes, my particular theme name, template system, page.html.twig. Okay, I know exactly what file I have to edit, especially if I created it, which I hopefully created it if it's in there. The name suggestion also has an X next to it. We did not use page-contact us. We used page.html.twig. So we have an X next to the one we actually used. To turn on theme debugging. Now we're getting a little bit away from front-end work. Look for a local development YAML file in your web directory /sites. Ours happens to be named development.services.yaml. Look for these parameters inside the Twig config, the debug, the auto reload, and the cache. I like to set these in this way. That way, the debugging is what's going to give me those. Gosh, I wish I knew PowerPoint enough to know which one went backwards. Anyway, the green stuff on the last slide, where you had that, where it told you exactly, it had the X next to it. You get that if you set it up this way. Now, if you create a file of this name, and if it's not there, if it's there, great, just edit it. If it's not there, you create a file, make sure you activate it in your site's default settings, local.php. This is where we're enabling local development services, which is this file, and it's on this line, the settings, container YAMLs, your Drupal site's development services, so it can look for the development services YAML file. And if it's not there, make sure you activate it inside the settings.php file.
In a static D8 install, there's no YAML file set up for you yet. You have to create it.
It doesn't give example files?
I'm not sure.
I think it gives you like an example.settings.local.php, I think.
Oh, we have to read it.
Okay, so you copy it, remove the example from it, and then edit it. Okay. See, that's great. I learned something. Thank you, Patriots fan. I don't remember your name. I'm sorry. I know we talked.
Right. Patriots fan is fine.
Patriots fan. And you're sitting right next to the Yankee fan. Okay. Now that I've kind of been touching on this subject a lot about hierarchy, and I've been talking about how can you tell the load order. And it's kind of similar in some ways to how WordPress does it, from specific to general. So let's say I made a theme, and this is something I do at Johnson & Johnson quite a bit. I've made a theme, and it's a Bootstrap child theme. So we're inheriting everything from the Bootstrap Drupal 8 theme, and we're setting that in our info YAML file. We're saying parent is Bootstrap, and now I've got a theme, and I create a template that matches the name, say page.html.twig. So in my child theme, I've made that file, and it's also in Bootstrap, same name. It's going to load mine, based on the fact that it's a child, and it's going to try to load everything in the child theme before it looks into Bootstrap. Similarly, it's going to try to load it in Bootstrap before it looks for it in core. So I've got myself covered. If I'm just doing match one for one on the naming conventions, I should be good, and it should load my file. However, let's say my theme just has page.html.twig. Bootstrap, say, has page dash dash a particular path or a particular content type, .html, .twig. It's going to load that one because it's going to say, hey, this is more specific. This is a more specific case than your general case in your theme. We're going to load Bootstrap's version. And you go, why did it do that? Well, that's why. It's going to look more specific to more general. If they're the same name, then it's going to look towards your theme. So how do you get around that? Well, if you want to override what's in Bootstrap, you have to create a file of the same name or one that's more specific. So here, I created a file inside Bootstrap. It doesn't really exist. I created something in Bootstrap called page-global.html.twig, and I put it in Bootstrap templates system, and it loaded it instead of the page.html.twig that I had in my own theme. So I confirmed it, that it would actually load Bootstrap's version, which was more specific, versus mine, that was still a child theme, but not as specific. So from a couple slides ago, that URL there, it's going to tell you exactly the sort order of the naming conventions of the template file. So you can use it as a reference. You can say, why is it mine loading? You can go to that as the source. Once you turn on the Twig debugging, you will see exactly. And there's going to be, on a given page, you could have 20 different template files that are going to load. Look inside your the generated code in an inspector, in a view source, however you want to look at it there. Look at all of those instances and see exactly which template file is being loaded. And if you want to override it, see which one is actually being loaded. Say, okay, the header menu is using menu-main.html.twig. If I want to override it, I just use the exact same name and I put it in my theme, and it'll work. It'll work exactly. So that being said, now we're going to get into kind of Twig itself. Not necessarily how does it get on the page, but this is Twig itself in the syntax. There's three basic syntax structures in Twig. There's the double, you guys like to say brace with this symbol, curly bracket? Okay, I'll use, anyone vote for brace? Yeah. Brace? I'll go.
I say brace, but I guess I won't vote.
I don't know. I'll go with curly bracket.
I don't know what you mean. What do you need?
Okay, the thing.
Yes,
I'll call it the thingy.
Okay.
I'll go with curly bracket. So that's what you want to say. So in PHP in a template, we would have an echo or we would have a print. Here we're going to use the double curly bracket to print or echo a variable or result from an expression, or we could use it to echo elements in an array after a loop. We have the kind of curly bracket %, that's kind of the do something syntax. So we can assign a variable, and we're going to use that with set. We can do conditionals as an if or something else. We're going to do a for loop. We can do an extends. And then the last one is how you comment something with the curly brace and then the hashtag, #, whatever. You can use that in comments. You can comment as you're writing your Twig file. And you can also use it as the dot block, something you would see from Drupal 7 template right at the top of your template file. And we have the same thing in Twig templates.
I have a question. And
Sure.
You might be covering this later, but I do a lot with Angular, and Angular syntax is the double curly brackets too. How do you avoid the conflict inside of Twig templates when you're actually putting Angular syntax in there?
That's an excellent question. And it's not come up with me because I don't use Angular.
I'm very new to Twig, so
Okay.
I haven't used it either. I didn't know if there was a conflict when putting Angular syntax inside of Twig.
I will give you the worst teacher answer I can think of, and I will look it up and let you know.
It's an honest answer.
Yeah, I don't really know. I'm not sure. As not being an Angular, I did not know it used a similar syntax. So it's a good question about how it handles that.
I was going to ask something similar.
Yeah.
You assume.
I would say, I just don't know with what, but I would
Yeah,
make
yeah.
an assumption.
Okay.
Smarty does the same thing.
Okay.
Okay. Well, yeah. There you go. Thank you. Twig operators, logic, we have and, or not, and you can group them with parentheses, similar to how you would do in PHP. in a conditional statement. A comparison, we use the double equals, not equal to, greater than, less than, greater than, equal to, less than or equal to. Starts with and ends with as well. We can do that. In and is, and I'm kind of giving an example here for in a for loop. So for the key element in an array, it's different. I think the order is different than it would have been in PHP. And is, if the prefix is not empty. And we would have done that differently in PHP as well. Some more syntax examples. Something very frequently in a template file, just rendering out the content, perhaps from a page as a node. The item URL, item.url, the URL attribute of the item, particularly in a menu. This is copy pasted from a menu twig. This is a particular one where we talked about set. How do we assign a variable? We use set. In this case, we're going to say heading ID equals the attribute ID with a concatenation of dash menu. And the squiggly line here is a concatenation in Twig. Here's a for loop for item in items. This, again, is copied out of a menu template. And I'm saying once I have that item, I'm going to make the href its URL attribute and the item its title attribute, and then do an end for on the loop. If menu level equals 0, here we are in a conditional. I didn't know what I wanted it to do, so let's just do something in there. Who knows what? And then an if. Okay. Another great thing that Twig does for us is filter. The translate filter, you can give it some string, press from a variable, maybe you define something. In a common Twig template in the HTML.Twig is kind of a skip to content as an empty A tag for accessibility purposes. So you might say your string might be skip to main content, and you throw a translate filter on the end of it. Clean class, clean ID. Let's say you're taking a variable, in this case theme settings, navbar position. I took this out of Bootstrap, and there's something in the Bootstrap theme where it allows me to move kind of the header menu around. And I just want to throw a filter clean class on it or a filter of clean ID on it, depending on which one we were using. And it prepares that string to be a valid class name or an ID. Join, as a safe join, the head title, you would see this in HTML.twig.html. On your head title, you want to do a safe join to take different parts of that head title variable and join them with the. That's why am I drawing away?
It's called a pipe.
Pipe. Thank you. The pipe symbol. And it has, in this case, we have our percents on the end of our filter, which is the argument. So we could give it a comma if we wanted that. We could put a dot in between them. A lot of different things with this particular filter. We use this one pretty frequently, and we use the second version of it pretty frequently. But the first one in item previous attributes, this happened to be taken out of a view template. It just how does it handle the previous and next? And in this case, we want to render the attributes of the particular link, but we want to render them without the href, the title, and the rel. So maybe there's some other kind of attribute we need to spit out at the end of our anchor tag, but we don't want any of these. We want to say maybe it's a data attribute, maybe it's some other kind of attribute. We want that, we just want it without the href. We've already got the href covered, the title and the relative attribute. This is the one we use more frequently. This kind of, if we have, say, a field or a node template, and we want to render out the content, but maybe we want to do something a little different with the fields that are in that content type. So let's say we're going to render the content, but I don't want to include this particular field. Maybe I need to move it into a different div. Maybe I need to put it in a header. Maybe I just don't want it to render in the same way it's going to render the rest of the fields in that particular content type. Well, I'll just render all of the fields without it, and then I'll just eventually render that particular field somewhere else. So in this case, I have company logo, I've got company name, I've got email support. Just the links one, I want to do something different. Maybe I want to wrap the title in a link. Who knows? Common filters, additional to the filter, the chaining. We can apply more than one filter to a variable at any given time. So in this case, I have my item.content. I want the first element of that array. And I want to take the first element of that array and I want to change it to lowercase. So I can change it. First and lower common twig filters, they're going to be applied in the order they're written. So it's first going to look for the first element of the item.content array, and then it's going to convert it to lowercase for me. There's a lot more filters, and this is a link to the 1.x version on the Symfony website, where you can see a lot of information about the syntax, the filtering, the functions that are available to you, the filters that are available to you. Drupal doesn't particularly use them all, but they're all there and they're all available for us. Another kind of common function is the block function, where if I'm rendering out, in this case, the content block in my particular block template, and I can wrap it in the block function. Drupal-specific Twig function. So Twig is extensible in that you can make your own functions. And Drupal does that for us in a couple of different ways, and mainly they're dealing with links. In fact, the three most common that I've seen, link, path, and file URL, all essentially deal with links. And link is used extensively. The menu template path will give you a relative URL path of what you pass into a file URL if you were to get, say, an image file from the backend or something you've created as a field and you want to save a PDF in that field or an image in that field. You can use file URL to give you a relative path. In fact, I've seen it loading a JavaScript file that way, although there are certainly other ways to load a JavaScript file in a theme. Additional functions can be found here. Additional core Twig functions can be found essentially at the same URL I just had there. But the Twig-specific ones, to familiarize yourself, there's a link for it. Common uses of templates. Okay. So this is from core, the menu.twig.html. Again, a bunch of template files in there. This is just one particular one. At the top in the doc block, we have it wrapped in comments. The great thing about Drupal is it's going to tell us the variables that are available to this template, and there are a few that are available for it that aren't listed. What can you do? And here is a particular inside the template file rendering. If there are menu items, we have another conditional if the menu level of your particular item, let's say it's a parent and not a child, it would have a level equal to 0. I want you to render, I want you to show me an unordered list with the attributes. And we know attributes is available to us because it's told that it's available to us. Otherwise, just render a unordered list without any classes, without any IDs on it. And then, again, same array, the same items array for each individual item in the item. Give me a list item. Render a function, use the link function. I'm going to pass in the title and the URL. It's going to spit back to me an HTML anchor. And then what does it do with child links? And again, we know we can see that item stuck below, the menu child items is available to us. And if we have that, use the menu links function and generate the menu structure and the conditional and the loop and the conditional. The page one. Page is another. It has a really long doc block on it. I've kind of highlighted a particular section, the regions that are available to it, the header, primary menu, secondary menu, highlighted help, content, and how it renders it in the Twig file. The header role, we just specified it. We didn't use a variable for that. Page header, page primary menu, page secondary menu, page breadcrumb. So let me pause this real quick to say, when I'm in a theme and I'm looking at something, I've made the decision, I want to override one of the template files that are in Bootstrap, I want to override one of the template files that are in Core. My thought process, and I do this over and over again, is see how the page renders. Look in the code, look for those theme hook suggestions, look for those template suggestions, figure out what template is actually being loaded. And I say, great, it's doing all the work for me. It's telling me. I don't really have to go reference it. I know exactly what's being loaded. I just copy that exact file name. I throw it in my theme. I create a file, I create an empty file of it. I copy in content from what's being loaded. So say it loaded the core menu or the core main menu template. I just copy paste it right into my template file, my empty template file, which has the same name, and I edit it. Maybe I'm changing the class. Maybe I'm adding a class to it. Maybe I'm changing an ID. Maybe I'm changing the HTML structure of the list item. Maybe I'm doing something to it. Maybe I'm trying to provoke a coworker and see if they can catch something in a code review. I don't know. I would never do that. But just for whatever reason. And say, I need to edit this file somehow. That's what I do. Create a file with the same name of exactly what's being loaded that I've seen in the inspection. Add to it. Maybe do it without to change how the content is doing. Just make some significant change to it. Significant enough to warrant having a template file, because once you have a template file, you get to maintain it, and other coders could be looking at it, and they could wonder, hey, why did you make a template file? Why didn't you do something else? And that could provoke quite a lengthy argument at work if you're not careful, and that could just be your afternoon. But anyway, so does it meet kind of the weight of wanting to create a template file if you have to maintain it? If you say yes, this is a particular use case where I do want to create a template file, copy paste in the original source, what you've seen, maybe from core, maybe from Bootstrap, maybe some other kind of apparent theme. Copy paste it in, edit it, save it. I forgot one very important detail when I say that, and you're going to see that on the last slide. Save it, see how it renders, and then just make further edits to it. If you're not sure about Twig, if you're not sure about what's available to it, maybe use a preprocessor. If you need additional variables inside your menu, inside your page, maybe consider using a preprocessor in your theme. If you don't want to use that, maybe consider one of these alternative methods to improving how it renders on your page. So, other options, if you've sat through here and you say, I really hate Twig now and you're a terrible instructor, I get it. I understand that. There are other options. If you like 90% of how it's rendering on the front end, you say, well, I need to change the order of it. There's options to change the order. You can change it through display. You can change it through CSS layouts. If you use Flexbox, if you use Grid, you can change the order of how things are rendering. You have a lot more layout tools available to you. You can make elements appear like they're part of their parent. You can use positioning. You can rearrange them. If all you were using a template file for is rearranging things on a page, there's probably other easier ways of maintaining that than making a template for it. You can make another display. Out of the box, you get the default display and the teaser display of a node. Maybe you can create another one through Page Manager and say, I want a third way to render this particular page, and maybe you use it. And it does the work for you if you can't use, maybe default's already being used to see a single version of that node. Maybe teaser is being used in a view so you see a paginated view of a particular node. Maybe you need a third one. That's great. If you can say out of your code base and you can handle it with just another page display, do it. One I tend to focus on, if you're in a view, add a global custom text to your view and say, I've already got these fields in there, link URL, link image, title, link description, and instead of making a template for this particular view, maybe I just hide all of those fields in the view, and maybe I make a global custom text. They're available to me in the replacement pattern that got cut off in the image. I'm going to fire the person that made this image if it wasn't me. Anyway, maybe just make it, assign classes as you would, give it the structure of HTML that you would like to give it, and save it. And make sure your view only displays the global custom field and not any of these fields. And then you'll see your view, and you've got it rendered out for you. Resources I use in putting this together, resources I use all the time. Drupal 8's Twig theming, Twig from the Symfony website, and Symfony 2 documentation is actually a great source as well. They've been doing it a lot longer than they have in Drupal 8. That being said, this is the last slide. Okay. The very last step, and I purposely didn't mention this, is even though in my development services YAML file, I say, just give me a fresh page load. Every time I save something, give me a fresh page load. it never works for me. I don't know if it hates me. I don't know if I have a syntax error. Something could be any number of things. Clear your cache. If you create a new template file before you show it in the front end, clear your cache. If you make a change to it and you save it, clear your cache. If you change anything in your SAS file or your CSS file, clear your cache. If you look at the website, clear your cache. If you're working locally, clear your cache. If you haven't cleared your cache in the last 15 minutes, clear your cache. I do that. I don't know how many times I've tried to figure out why it's not working, and Matt goes, "Hey, did you clear your cache?" Of course. You know the answer. Of course I cleared. Hey, it works. That's great. Thank you for helping. That's it. That's hopefully a decent introduction to Twig. I recommend doing a lot of trial and error with it. Like I said, copy in things from core, copy in things from parent theme, tweak them, change them around, change the structure, add classes, remove classes, rearrange them however you'd like. Hopefully this has been informative to some people, and I thank you all for coming. And ready to answer any questions you may have, except about Angular.
I'm a minor developer more than a front-end person, but I was wondering, from purist point of view, when you say create a custom block or something, would you just output HTML, or would you create a quick template for that?
I guess I would consider whether it met the mustard of needing to maintain something that drastically changed. We have a lot of arguments. In fact, the thing I showed with views, where I took those fields and put them in the view, we've had a lot of arguments as whether that was the best approach to do it, whether it was best to use a teaser for it, perhaps, and change the order. I would use a template for it. And I would have that block defined in config management. So I would know the ID of that block. So I don't have a situation where I've created a template file and I know that it's being saved. So I have a one-to-one for it. So I know that in config I've got that block defined, and I know I've got it defined in my template, in my theme. That being said, if I were to change the theme, I would lose that information. Versus if I saved it with the block, it would be present with the block. Yours kind of right in the middle. I think you could go either way. I don't think it's that frequent a use case where you change themes. I know they like to say, well, you can save it here, and if you change themes, it all gets wiped away. I never change themes on a website myself. I don't. It's just yeah. It's just not. I'm never finding myself switching between themes. It's usually a new theme, and if you're putting in a new theme, you're doing a whole bunch of other things anyway. So I'd say that's a personal preference. Just be consistent with it. Is it just you, or do you have a team of developers?
Right now it's just me.
Okay.
Used to be a team.
Just be consistent with it. Yes.
It's you never got to the topic, but just out of curiosity, with Johnson & Johnson, how often do you guys actually end up using like macros in your Twig files? Do you guys ever use macros?
Essentially, just in the menu.
Yeah, just in the menu.
Is there only use case for it? I wasn't sure whether I should include that in a beginner one. I didn't get to it either. But yeah, we just use it in the menu principally.
Is there any other particular instance where you would foresee a macro being very useful?
Not for us, no.
Is there talk of Drupal moving to Twig too?
I hope so. I've seen reference to maybe a future version of Drupal 8 using it. Maybe I missed any talk about Drupal 9. I don't know if they mentioned it in there. It might be feasible there. I know Symfony 3 uses it. I hope so. I think you get a lot more useful tooling in there. And I don't know how many times I've read a documentation, and I think it'll work, and I've read it in Twig 2. I go, oh, shoot. Well, that's my own fault. Yes?
Going back to that views example you had, and offering alternatives to using Twig, like
Yes.
changing the order of fields in the manage display settings. How do you feel about like separating layout specific changes from content and ensuring
That was our argument.
Right. So I mean, especially like in a multi-developer environment, you make a change like that, which goes to database and is basically config. And while they're working on something else, and then they bring down those changes and everything gets screwed up. So do you try to ensure that all of your layout changes are done within Twig, even if it's like really minor, or is there like some sort of balance?
In that particular example that I showed, we ended up, we did some more changes to it, and we actually used the view, instead of using fields, we ended up having the view use a teaser, and we edited the teaser template for that particular view. And that was our solution there, essentially for the reasons you said. It was more important for us to be aligned on our, because we had 3 developers and we were all essentially making views of different content types at the same time, and all 3 of us netted out at a different result. And that was going to be horrible to maintain. So we just settled on, and we haven't used teasers anywhere on the website. And we were just, essentially most of the nodes that were created from content types weren't publicly accessible anyway, because they were just going to be shown as a listing, exported as a view. So we aligned on, we're never going to use the default, we're never going to use the teaser, so let's use the teaser in the view and make a Twig template for the teaser. Okay, any other questions? Well, you guys have been a great audience. Thank you.
You've been a great teacher.
I don't know. Let's not get hate speech.